In this episode, we're going to hear from a couple who had a very crazy encounter with someone from the other side. Then, at the end of this video, there is a preview of the latest release on Donovan Dread True Crime. It's another case that David Politis has covered, and I do believe I said his name right. But before we get into the stories, did you know that science now shows if you press the red subscribe button, you can increase your happiness by 28%? Now let's get into the stories. Hi Donovan. My wife and I love watching your videos. It was her idea to send you our story, but she asked me to write it. Before this happened to us, I never really thought much about the supernatural stuff, but I do now. 2013 was a big year for us. Abby and I were getting married in October. And then 3 months before our wedding, we found out we were expecting our first child. With so much going on already, we decided why not add more stress and buy our first house. We had been renting a 2-bedroom apartment close to DC for 2 years, but we were paying so much in rent that we decided it made more sense to move out of the city into a suburb in Virginia. I knew I was looking at a long commute with DC traffic, but it was worth it to actually buy our own house. We needed more space and could get a house for less money than we were paying monthly in rent for our small apartment. Abby was working as a nurse in the ER department not far from our apartment. As soon as we found out about the baby, we realized she wouldn't be able to keep doing the 12-hour shifts. She planned to keep working during her pregnancy, but since we were moving anyway, and she was so exhausted with the pregnancy, we decided she needed to quit her full-time job. That meant we had to budget for a new house with only my income. With the home prices in Northern Virginia, we definitely couldn't afford our dream home. We looked at a lot of houses and quickly realized that we're not going to find any new or newly updated house in the location we wanted in our price range. We decided that if the location and lot were good, we would consider a fixer-upper. We were just about ready to give up on our house search when we finally found the perfect house. It wasn't exactly perfect as it was, but it was in a great location, on a perfect little lot and well within our budget. The listing described it as a house with a lot of potential. I immediately saw the potential, but Abby needed some convincing. The house had so much character. It was over 100 years old, so much older than any house I've ever thought I would buy. We both loved all the unique little touches we didn't see in most of the cookie-cutter homes we had toured. This house had only 3 bedrooms, but the rooms were huge. It had a big unfinished basement, which wasn't high on Abby's priorities, but I thought it would be great for a workout room and maybe a workshop. Abby had a hard time looking past the odd paint colors and outdated kitchen, but there were some great updates like the roof and the heating and the air conditioning system. At first, I was concerned that a house this age wouldn't be cool enough because it obviously wasn't built with central air conditioning. That would have been a deal breaker for me, but the previous owners who lived there for only 2 years had installed a top-of-the-line VRF system, which kept the entire house really cool. Abby did love the neighborhood, and after going over the numbers, we decided we could update the kitchen right away. This was enough to get Abby on board with this house, so we offered a full listing price because there was another offer already on the table. We got the call from our agent the next day that the offer had been accepted. I was glad because by that point, Abby had planned out our lives in that little house. Little did she know what would happen in that house. We closed on the house just 3 weeks before our wedding and moved in right away. We didn't have nearly enough furniture to fill up our new house. We actually didn't have much furniture at all, and what we did have was mostly furniture that our parents no longer wanted. We ordered a new bedroom set, which was delayed, so we ended up sleeping on an air mattress when we moved in. Abby was exhausted after the move, so she went to bed early the first night in the house, probably around 8 o'clock. My brother Mitch had come up from North Carolina, and we were trying to reassemble a shelving unit that had been disassembled for the move. It was a harder job than we expected, and I'm sure the beer didn't help to make it any easier. Mitch was planning to stay at our parents' house that night, but after having some drinks, he decided just to stay on our couch that night. I think it was around midnight when I went to bed. Abby was sound asleep, and I tried to get into bed without disturbing her, as I knew she was exhausted. The air mattress was more comfortable than I expected. Or maybe I was just really tired, but either way, I fell asleep right away. I wasn't asleep long when I woke up shivering. I knew the AC worked well in this house, but I was actually freezing. I looked over at Abby and she was still asleep. I got up to see if I could find a blanket somewhere in one of the boxes in our bedroom. As I got out of bed, I could have sworn I saw movement like someone ran out of our bedroom. Of course, this made no sense because Abby was sleeping, and we didn't have pets or anything, so I assumed I was imagining things half asleep. I was using the light on my phone to dig through a box to find some blankets when I realized it wasn't even cold in the room anymore, so I went back to bed. We didn't have any blinds on our windows, so the next morning Abby and I both woke up as soon as the sun started shining in our windows. I asked her if she slept okay on the air mattress, and she said she did once I finally stopped coming in and out of the bedroom. I was confused and asked what she meant. She said she heard me opening and closing the bedroom door and pacing in the hallway. She asked what I was doing. I had no idea what she was talking about, and assumed she must have been dreaming. She seemed convinced of it, so I just said sorry if I woke you up, and we left it at that. Looking back, I guess that should have seemed more alarming. I knew I wasn't pacing the hallway. Mitch had already left when I went downstairs. I talked to him later that day, and he asked me if Abby had trouble sleeping. I said no, why? He said he kept hearing walking or pacing upstairs in the hallway. He said he knew it wasn't me because I sound like an elephant when I walk and this was quiet. I told him he was crazy and he must have drank more than I thought he did. But I did think it was strange that Abby had heard the same thing. The next 2 weeks were really busy. We were still unpacking and getting the new house in order, while getting ready for our wedding. I was also getting used to my new commute. I knew my commute would be longer, but I still wasn't prepared for just how much time I would be spending on the road. Luckily, I was able to flex my schedule so that I could start going in an hour early, which meant I could beat some of the traffic in and out of the city. We had the perfect wedding day and enjoyed every minute of our honeymoon in Punta Cana. After all of the work the past weeks, a week of relaxing on the beach and by the pool was perfect. As much as we enjoyed the time away, we were glad to be back home after our honeymoon. Abby was starting to feel more energetic and was excited about starting the kitchen remodel, which we did as soon as we got home. Abby and I did most of the demolition ourselves in one weekend. My friend, who is a contractor, started working on the kitchen the next week. We had been eating out or getting takeout or microwaving food while sitting on the couch, since our kitchen was destroyed. One evening, Abby insisted that we actually have a real dinner at home. We couldn't actually cook in the kitchen, so I grilled some chicken and veggies. Abby set the dining room for a candlelight dinner. We had originally said that we didn't need a house with a formal dining room because we didn't think we would ever use it. But this dining room was really something, especially in candlelight. We had just started eating when Abby started coughing uncontrollably. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that she felt like she couldn't breathe. Obviously, she was breathing because she was able to talk, but every time she tried to eat, she started coughing. She was worried and started to panic because of the baby, so she called her doctor to see if she should go to the hospital. She was on hold with the doctor, and as soon as she walked out of the dining room, she stopped coughing. She apologized for calling, and she said she was now feeling fine. We settled into our life in our new house. Neither of us were sleeping very well. Abby blamed it on the pregnancy. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but it did sound like there were footsteps in the hallway at night. Not loud, but quiet footsteps, almost like a child was walking or running in the hallway. We finished the kitchen remodel before Christmas and enjoyed the holidays in our new home. Our daughter Lily was born in March. Looking back, the early years of Lily's life are kind of a blur. Work was getting increasingly stressful. Abby loved being home with Lily, but I know she missed working because she truly loved being a nurse. She said sometimes it felt like someone else was in the house. She couldn't really explain what she meant. I thought maybe she was spending too much time at home alone with Lily and really missed the adult interaction, especially since I was spending longer days at work. When Lily was 3 years old, Abby found out that a primary care doctor she knew from the neighborhood was looking to hire a part-time nurse, basically to job share with another nurse. This was perfect as Abby was not ready to go back to work full-time, especially with the cost of daycare. Abby got the job working 2 or sometimes 3 days per week. We found a great preschool for Lily, and she was so excited to start going to school. She wore her little pink backpack around the house for weeks before preschool even started. Lily loved preschool, and her teacher said she was doing great. Lily loved the other kids, but since we dropped her off early before most of the others, we didn't have the chance to meet many of the other children in her class. Lily talked about her friend Anna all of the time. We heard about Anna's pretty dresses and her long braids. Lily wanted to have red hair like Anna, and suddenly wanted to wear dresses every day like Anna did. One day, I think it was a Saturday, I walked past Lily's bedroom and she was talking and laughing and singing. She couldn't stop laughing. I asked her what was so funny and she said, "Anna is funny." I thought she was laughing about something Anna did at school. I asked Lily if her teacher thought Anna was funny. Lily looked confused and said, "Daddy, that's silly. Anna doesn't go to school." I was confused, so I asked, where did she play with Anna? She said, "Here, Daddy, she lives here," and started laughing and talking to herself again. I told Abby about the conversation. She said she would ask Lily's teacher about Anna, and when she did, we learned that there was no Anna in her class. Lily's teacher told Abby that it's not all that unusual for children that age to have imaginary friends. Lily had such a vivid imagination, and we decided that it was nothing to worry about. That year, we decided to host a Friendsgiving party with some of our neighborhood friends the weekend before Thanksgiving. We invited 3 families, 2 of which had little girls about the same age as Lily. Abby set up the kids' table next to the adult table, and Lily insisted that Anna needed a chair at the table. I thought this was going a little overboard, but Abby had a hard time saying no to Lily. As soon as we started eating, Lily started screaming. This was not like her at all. She frantically said, "Mommy, help Anna." Abby immediately ran over to Lily, but Lily was pretty much hysterical. She said, "Anna coughing, help her, Mommy." Abby remained calm and tried to comfort her. Lily ran from the dining room to her bedroom, and Abby followed. The rest of us tried to finish dinner, but everyone was definitely on edge. They all knew about Lily's imaginary friend, Anna, but none of us had ever seen Lily act like that. The party was cut short and everyone left before we even had dessert. I went to check on Lily and Abby and found them both asleep on her little bed. They looked so sweet and my heart was still breaking for Lily as I had never seen her so upset. As I was leaving her bedroom, I thought I heard Lily say, "Bye-bye, Anna." After that dinner, Lily didn't talk about Anna anymore. Abby and I didn't want to upset her, so we didn't ask about Anna, and we all stayed out of the dining room. Abby continued to do great at preschool. In January, it was her turn to be Student of the Month. This meant that she got to create a poster all about her to share with the class. Lily loves to have her picture taken, so Abby has many pictures on her phone. She was scrolling through pictures for the preschool poster when I heard her say, "What in the world?" Lily was sitting on the floor watching TV. Abby walked over to her and showed her the phone. She said, "Lily, honey, did you take this picture?" Lily loved to take our phones and snap pictures of random things around the house, so I really didn't think much about it until I heard Lily's answer. "Yes, that's Anna. We play hide and seek." Abby tried to hide her surprise, but she looked like she could barely stand up. She came over to me and dropped her phone in my lap. Here's the picture that she showed me. We still live in the same house. Lily is 8 years old now and she loves being a big sister to our new little baby. Lily hasn't talked about Anna since that dinner when she was 3 years old. I don't know if she remembers it, but Abby and I will never forget that dinner. I guess we'll never know exactly what happened that night, or what happened in this house before it was our house. This story takes place upstate New York, in Lake George Wild Forest to be exact, where an ex-paratrooper walked into the woods and never walked out. Tom Messick was described by his wife as a man's man. who would never pass up an opportunity to help someone. She can't recall ever hearing anyone say a bad thing about Tom or not liking him, and that says a lot because at the time of his disappearance, they had been married for 56 years. Tom was an avid camper and a seasoned outdoorsman. He was always eager to share his love of the outdoors with his family. Throughout his life, during and after his service in the military, he found time for his true passion, hunting and fishing. If you combine those things with his wife and children, Tom had all that he needed. Tom began hunting as a kid with his father and grandfather, and had been hooked ever since. In November of 2015, Tom Messick and his hunting buddies and their sons took their annual hunting trip. This trip, only to be outdone by Tom's marriage to Beverly, has happened every year for 55 years. The same spot, the same core group of guys, give or take a couple of substitutes throughout the years, of course. This particular year, Tom was in danger of missing the trip. He had just gotten over a bout of shingles, and his years in the military were wearing him down in his older age. At 20, he had a gunpowder accident and was 90% blind in his right eye. His ears were pretty much shot, as well as his knees from all of his helicopter jumps. Nevertheless, Tom wasn't going to miss the trip. He was a loyal friend and father. On November 15th, the 7 men arrived at Lily Pond via Lily Pond Road, a gravel road that was 2 miles long and took roughly 12 minutes to drive. This hunt was really just a hunt to say that they hunted. No one had high expectations. It was in the middle of the day around noon, and they were only planning on hunting for 2 hours or so. The men parked their trucks in a parking lot near the pond and made their game plan. They decided that the 4 older men, all in their 80s, would walk down an access road near the bottom of the hill, and the 3 younger sons would walk the snowmobile path up the hill, turn around and push any deer that might be in the area towards the men posted at the bottom of the hill. This style of hunting is known as a deer drive. The 4 older men, including Tom, took off down the access road. They had their walkie-talkies, rifles, and necessary hunting apparel and gear. When they got to their agreed-upon spot, the men spaced 100 yards apart and were to walk 30 to 40 yards into the woods and find a spot to sit. They were to just stay put and wait for the other guys to push any deer towards them. Tom was the furthest of the 4 men as they spread out. The men were 100 yards apart and separated by a moderately dense forest. Nothing crazy. They were bantering back and forth on the walkie-talkies, waiting for a shot at something. Now, I guess this is a good time to mention that in the 55 years the men had been going on this trip, if you want to continue watching this story about Tom Messick, please click on the link below in the description or the pinned comment and watch it in its entirety on Donovan Dread True Crime.